Hey, Bradley Sowash here with another piano improv tip of the month. How do jazz musicians practice if the music's different every time? So we're going to compare classical and jazz goals and how we adjust to those in our practice schedule a little bit. I'm going to walk through some options of what I might teach in a typical class assignment for my online jazz piano lessons, or what I do in my own practice sessions, sort of how that looks different from practicing literature. And I'm going to end, get this, with a world premiere of a funny poem on this same topic. Okay, the end goal is to play exactly as written. And how do we get there? How do we get to exactly as written? But while you're thinking of that, let me qualify. I never want to say that there's not creativity involved in written music, because we might change the expression, the touch, the way we interpret the dynamics, the phrasing, all that. There's plenty of room for creativity, but the notes are given. And so it's a goal to try to get the notes that the composer intended, right? Anything else? So what do we do typically to get those notes well underhand? Try to play the save each time. Get as close as possible to perfection. I have a thing on my wall here to remind me. It says, amateurs practice until they get it right. Pros practice until they can't get it wrong. That applies to written music, where you have a standard. You have a way to compare what you're working on to what the goal is. Classical music builds fabulous technique. It enables access to great literature. It lets you see how the master's thought, lets you absolutely be able to see the notes they picked and why. There's so much I love about classical music. What I don't like about it is what it does to musicians. In many cases, it scars musicians because they become paralyzed by perfection. I've suffered from this myself, having studied a ton of classical music in music school and growing up. And we all know that feeling about, oh man, I got to play this. I hope I don't make a mistake. And our whole performance is evaluated by those two wrong notes. So through the repetition, the muscle memory, the form, all this sinks in, and we hit that repetition so that we're able to express when we actually perform it. So I'm commenting on how often when I help recovering classical pianists, which I say tongue-in-cheek, learn to play jazz, how often they are just kind of full of fear about playing and choosing their own notes, okay? And so sometimes I think that the way we study exclusively to the very difficult written page leaves some baggage which hurts our overall musicianship, especially when we try to wander from the way we've been trained. How is that different from studying written literature? The practice goal for jazz musicians is to be never the same, is to never be identical, to never have an exact repetition. How would that be able to be practiced? There's no standard. You can do it one way or another, and every day is different. So what do you work on? It's such a different mindset than playing to the written page and having the black and white proof of what it is you're going for. So a few more comments on that. The jazz musician, improvising musician's process is constant discovery. Some days are terrible music, and some days are better. But most of the time, most people don't know because they actually don't know what you're trying to play. That's a huge secret. When you're playing improvised music, they don't know what you're going for, so they're more forgiving because they haven't heard what you're trying to play before. It's kind of more like speaking. It's like I'm doing right now. I have a general idea of what I want to say, but it's not scripted. I can choose the words as I go. I have an outline for today's talk, but I am moving fluently in it with your expectations of our shared language, grammar, trying to be clear with the lesson plan. And so I'm using a format and a form, but the actual words, which is in a comparison to notes, are variable as I go. And so it is necessarily stamped with my personality. It's more than intuition. It's about having a bag of tricks. So classical music seeks through repetition to build muscle memory and a precision, which then enables expression down the road. Jazz and improvised music seeks to have never the same, but to build a vocabulary of usable licks and friendly figures, which you necessarily, even with those, never play exactly the same. I'm just going to walk you through some of the things that would be in a typical jazz practice session or a jazz assignment as I might assign it. However, there's too many here because you wouldn't want to do all these. You would just do a few of them lest you'd be overwhelmed. So the first thing is jazz musicians work a lot on technique, but it's not mindless muscle memory technique. It has a creative approach to it. And so the first thing they might do is just play scales. And there's so many ways to play scales, but they're always squared. I'm not going to talk too much about squared scales because I have a whole handout on that, and I've hit that before. But they come out evenly. So I try to give you an example of that. Let's just do an E-flat scale. Ready? In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. See how that's an even phrase? Quite different from the way we play scales more for finger dexterity. You can do that at different speeds. There's triplets. But it always comes out 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's squared to fit the phrase. So that's one way to play scales. Another is to play turnbacks or circle patterns in scales. This is all to prepare your fingers and your knowledge of your instrument to navigate improvisation. So I might do this. Let's see. Or so we're just playing a pattern in that scale, just to get that dexterity, but also the idea of moving around freely. Lastly, I might play up one note and down another note, because in real music and improvisation, you don't always start on the tonic chord. So you might go like this. Up on E flat, down on F. Up on G. Down on A flat. So we're practicing starting at any point in the scale so that when we're playing a tune, wherever we are and we need to switch scales, we can. And then you repeat all that in another key. Jazz players are always saying, do it in 12 keys, play it in all keys. You know, that's a big order. So the first thing is to hit those scales. And I am big on technique. You have to have the fluency in your instrument to get through it and move freely without stumbling over the notes, no matter what instrument you play. And so every lesson, every practice session includes these 3 bits under technique. Ready? Scales, chords, and scales and chords together. We just looked at a few of the many, many ways you can practice scales, but the emphasis is on making them come out in an even phrase. Let's look at some chords. So chord drills are something I'm very big on. I'm just going to run a quick thing right here around the circle. So we're going to work this way around here, C, F, B flat. We're going to move around the circle of fourths and just run those triads. So C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp, B, E, A. This is just a typical chord drill to build fluency. What a jazz player wants is fluency, to be able to speak on the spur of the moment, but not have to stumble. You know, there's a million ways. Here's the same thing as arpeggios. C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp, B, E, A, D, G, C. Let's play that without talking. So that would be an example of a triad drill, and I could go on and on with about 25 other ways to do that. Another way, then we might do that with 7th chords. So I'm going to do that same thing: C, F, B flat, E flat. Thanks for the thumbs up. A flat, D flat, F sharp, B, and I'm playing all major 7s. So I just played all major 7s. It's absolutely the door to freedom. If you hesitate on chords, you really don't know your vocabulary. You have to have instant fluency with chords. Let me just show you a couple other things that jazz players will do. So one of those is to work on one voicing. So I'm going to use in this voicing 2 voicings. I'm going to play a root 7-3 and then root 3-7. So let's listen to that. Root 7-3. Root 3-7, root 7-3, root 3-7, root 7-3, root 3-7, because those are all major 7s. So we just took one voice and we could do a more elaborate voicing, like let's see, we could do, which were all 9th and 13th chords. So we're practicing a chord shape that's beyond its normal thing. One more thing we could do with chords is run patterns through those sequences. One of my favorites is to go up to the 9th by skips and down by scale. So that's how that would sound on a C major 7. C, E, G, B, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. And then just as a way to discover this chord scale relationship. That can also be reversed, scale up, chord down, scaling up, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, B, G, E, C. So just practicing these patterns, you can also run them around sequences such as this. So these are all just examples of possible ways to work the chords and scales together. And you wouldn't try to do all those in one time. You might spend, 3 months on one sequence like that. So then after we've practiced chords as chords, we've practiced, scales as scales, chords as chords, then we put the scales and the chords together. And you've seen this before. If you've followed me at all, I'm a big advocate of scaling the chords, which basically means taking a common, not very challenging chord progression and adding a new element each time. So we might just take that progression like this. I'll do a C, F, E, A, D, G, C. Those are all in the key of C. Didn't call the qualities out. I'll take that and change up one element of it. So we've already taken many steps and we're comfortable improvising. Right hand is free, left hand is chording. Now this time, I'm going to try to use some chromatic notes. This time, I'm going to use lots of triplets. So I'm arbitrarily picking something to change it up. This time I'm going to change the style to a Latin style. So the point is we're taking the same thing, a familiar territory, and we're changing one element. Maybe we change keys. Maybe we change tonalities. Same progression. So the idea is that you're in familiar ground, but you're tweaking one bit to develop that fluency. Okay, and then there's always an element of aural. There's always a part about practicing some ear training. There's millions of ways to do that. One I love is to sing and play. So the idea is that I'm connecting my musical imagination through my voice to my piano, and I probably wouldn't sing very much in public, but I actually do a fair amount, but not on purpose. One of the things that happens in my online jazz piano classes, I ask the students, students is such a funny word when you're teaching peers, but my participants to post videos on a private Facebook group, and they're a little bit reluctant to do that because they say it's not ready. Oh, it's not polished. But that isn't the point, right? You never know exactly how it's going to come out, and you just do it often and see what happens. Some days it comes out blah, some days it comes out pretty good, and sometimes it comes out blah, and someone else says that was great. So we've hit classical and jazz broadly. We've looked at the technique of how jazz players practice. Now I'm going to look a little bit about the tunes. Working on Yesterday, that famous tune, Paul McCartney and Lennon, that became a standard. So once the tune's underhand and we figured out the voicings and the melody and all that, the next thing is to analyze that chord scale relationship we talked about earlier. Just as an example, without getting lost in the details, this is in F major. F major has a B flat in it, but the second chord is an E minor 7, has a B natural in it. So that tells me I've got to rethink my scale and pick a scale that has a B natural in it to make that fit my improvisation. So there's some analysis with the tunes. And I know that when I've learned literature, I've also done analysis, but it's a little bit different because the analysis leads to what notes we choose. And that's the biggest difference between written music and jazz music. Both are very creative. It's just that the jazz players are actually picking their notes for a large part of the time. So then after analyzing it, we would look to never play it the same. Never play it the same. And that means embellishing and hearing it new ways each time. So instead of yesterday, exactly as the music says, all my troubles seem so far away. That's what is on the lead sheet or the arrangement. But we might do it this way. So I'm not ever going to play that exactly the same way, but the guts are still there. The framework's there, the chords, the melody, and I'm just kind of moving in a way that feels appropriate to this moment in the same way that I'm speaking with you, in a way that feels just of how I'm feeling today. One of my students said they had a weird dream, and they heard this as a jazz waltz, and she just had the idea, what if it were 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And so we're going to kind of look at that. She had this idea. It's a very unexpected idea for a nice, beautiful ballad. And that's what we do, putting your own priorities over the composer. And you know what? Someone like Paul McCartney would smile at that, I'm sure. So there's the tunes. And then the other idea is, this is a big one. So listen carefully. You have that bag of tricks. I call them creative concepts. And they're independent of the tune. So maybe on yesterday I discovered the idea of using surrounding melody notes. So let's do this. I did a little chromatic surround around that. And so I'm really working that concept very cerebrally and very deliberately with the hope that it will eventually become intuitive. So you have a collection of creative concepts that you're constantly adding to, things like retrograde and repeated notes and fill notes and fills that are independent of fill notes and neighbor tones and surround tones and chromatic alterations and all this. You're constantly adding so that you can choose the colors and the sounds that you want because you know how these things sound. And you say, I want to color it this way right now. I'm feeling snarly. I'm going to put those gritty notes in, or I'm feeling very beautiful, or it's appropriate to play this for this amazing wedding anniversary that I'm asked to play a gig on. And, so you're able to pull from a palette, and you've developed that palette of colors or bag of tricks or creative concepts by working them independently of tunes, so they move from tune to tune. The last part of an assignment or practice session is to work on what interests you. One of my jazz teachers was Hal Gelper, a jazz pianist in New York, played with Phil Wood's quintet, and he said to practice the most what interests you. As a jazz player, you want to go down those lanes, because you're building your ability to make choices, and you develop that individual voice by following what grabs your attention. So part of every practice session needs to be spending time on something that you just personally liked, that leads you down a road. And so on all my assignments, I actually have a part at the bottom that says on your own, and the student can track and tell me what they did. And sometimes they say, I didn't get to some of the stuff you assigned because I got so involved in this new composition or whatever. And that's actually encouraged. My mother used to say, when I would play downstairs in the basement where our piano was, she'd say, she'd stomp on the kitchen floor, bang, 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 Bradley, practice the assignment. That's not the assignment. My mom had the same piano teacher that I did. And my piano teacher was ancient. And she, I wish she would have said, practice what interests you most at the end, because in the end, that's what led me to having a career. Not every practice session is going to include all these, let's face it, but maybe over the course of a month, you've hit all these things. So this is, I wanted to make some poems up yesterday. I'm kind of known for my sayings, like, when in doubt, pen out, meaning use the pentatonic scale when you're nervous, or if the beat's not steady, the tune's not ready. I like to do these Muhammad Ali type silly little rhymes. And I started to do that for this yesterday, and this poem came out. And I'll wrap it up with this, but here it is. An unintended poem called Musical Balance by Bradley Sowash. Ready? For the reading musician, wrong notes are just wrong, but accidents for improvisers mean adjust and go on. The first approach is clear. Interpret the ink. The second one reminds us, play what you think. Rubato in classical is flexible and airy. See this coming by. In popular standards, the beat must not vary. Concert hall performers are normally discreet. Those who play gigs just might tap their feet. Harmony that's written is scored as if law. Symbols mark chords in lead sheets, if at all. One practice has rules, it polishes and revises. The other invents tools, discoveries, and devices. Repetition in literature leads to precision. Choices in standards are instant decisions. In one, tones are frozen, the music a script. In the other, notes are chosen, guidelines to be flipped. Which approach is better? Is it based on disposition? That some prefer to see the notes and others intuition? What if classical performers played jazz at home at night? And play-by-ear musicians could read new music at sight? The fact is, it happens everywhere and every day. Musicians can choose more than one way to play. Versatile players go to considerable lengths to develop their weaknesses and build on their strengths. So here is my suggestion, if you'd like to know. Expanding self-expression is a great way to go. Learn to read and improvise. Give yourself permission. Diversify your playing and be a better musician. Until next time, enjoy your creative music-making journey. Bye for now.